could be said that we traffic in two commodities, trust and transparency. Our raw material is transparency, and our finished product is trust. It's really a rather short supply chain. Our trust, our agreement with readers, is that we will do our level best to deliver the most thorough, unbiased, truthful, in-depth, and interesting news report possible within the constraints of time, our own creativity and curiosity, and other non-renewable resources, such as, you know what, money. And then we'll do it again in the next minute, and the next hour, and then the next day. And bless our planet and all the inhabitants therein, there ain't no shortage of news. But the other part of the trust is that we will use the liberties granted to us by the First Amendment in the way that the amendments were intended, as a check on concentrated power. In journalism, acting as a check on concentrated power, or as Anderson Cooper likes to say, keeping them honest, whoever them is, it's the role of investigative reporting. That is, reporting that seeks to not just report the news, but to unearth the consequences and machinations behind it, and to report the hidden but consequential story. I've had the opportunity over the last several years to lead a group of investigative reporters at the Times. We have about 15 people who are dedicated to investigative reporting, both editors and reporters, and then we have people spread out around the rest of the paper also doing in-depth reporting. But our job is to range across sort of the landscape and bring those hidden but consequential stories to the surface. Over the years, we have exposed the dangers of pharmaceutical ingredients from China, the lack of adequate armor for US troops in Iraq, the problems with online charter schools, the environmental problems caused by data centers and their voracious appetite for electricity, the dangers of bad hamburger meat, how the Obama administration turned a bias lawsuit on behalf of minority farmers into a multi-billion-dollar boondoggle, the enormous growth and questionable value of tax incentives to businesses, emotional problems and violence among returning war veterans, the Obama administration's wide use of armed drones, telephone hacking by a certain British tabloid owned by a certain media mogul, the Pentagon's hidden hand in turning retired generals into a media message machine, the power of the gun lobby, the seemingly never-ending growth of anonymous money in the political process, the drugging of racehorses, the failed reconstruction of post-earthquake Haiti, and on and on. In short, we're a happy, optimistic group, and great dinner guests. No one ever invites us back. Last year, it actually is a fantastic group of veteran reporters and editors. It's been like an absolute joy and struggle to lead. I thought I'd take you a little bit inside the Walmart story because I think it's, first of all, it's interesting, but I also think it's a particularly strong example of the power and invaluable role of investigative reporting in our society. A couple of years ago, one of our national reporters, Jim McKinley, received a tip about possible wrongdoing at Walmart, which he passed along to our group. One of our reporters, David Barstow, began piecing together what seemed at the time like a rather astounding and frankly kind of hard to believe story. That Walmart had systematically bribed officials in Mexico on the way to becoming, to build store after store on the way to becoming the largest private employer in the country. That, as you know, is a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits US companies from paying bribes overseas. But even more difficult to believe was the second part of the story, that Walmart officials in Mexico City and Bentonville, Arkansas, knew about the bribery, and rather than investigate it and bring it to the attention of US and Mexican authorities, as was their legal obligation, they simply buried it and moved on. But despite the common image of investigative reporting, I assure you these stories were not handed to us. Everyone who talks to a reporter or helps a reporter does so out of his or her own motivations. And it's the reporter's job to adjust for that, to separate spin from fact. And frankly, the media does that sometimes well, sometimes not so well. Now, we imagine that in corporate boardrooms and government agencies, people involved in some deal or maneuver occasionally say, how would this look on the front page of the New York Times? You know, I really feel for them, because we face that question every day. I mean, we have to put something on the front page of the New York Times every day. And the thought of our stories, particularly a story accusing the world's largest retailer of bribery, appearing on the front page was bracing. It caused a lot of sleepless nights as we were getting up to the point, because it was one of these stories that really kind of depended on many facts, but leading up to a single fact, which is that this scheme had taken place and was buried. We just simply couldn't be wrong, not even a little bit wrong. The vetting process on those stories took weeks. We made sure that Walmart saw every document and knew literally every fact on which our stories relied. By the time we were done, Walmart offered no defense. No defense. They did what they were obligated to have done years before. They reported to the Justice Department, which launched a widespread FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices investigation. And Walmart has now spent over $150 million instituting changes to its global compliance with anti-corruption laws, all because of newspaper stories. They made the world a little less crooked by holding a major corporation to account and forcing the government to act. I'm happy to report that even as the financial model of the journalism business is increasingly shaky, investigative reporting is growing, which, as the Walmart story and others like it show, is good for society and will help journalism fulfill its trust with readers. But on the other commodity in which we deal, transparency, the news is not really as good. In fact, many see it as downright bad. The government has gone on a campaign against leakers, striking fear of prison in the hearts of would-be whistleblowers, and it's altering our relationship and access to sources and to unfiltered information about how the government operates. As our executive editor, Jill Abramson, said on CBS the other morning, the Obama administration has instituted 7 criminal leak investigations. These 7 leak investigations are more than double all of the criminal leak investigations in all the administrations before the Obama administration. It puts a chill on what is really a healthy discourse between journalists and their sources. Earlier this year, the Justice Department, while in pursuit of a leaker of a story about a foiled al-Qaeda plot, seized 2 months' worth of records of 21 phone lines used by as many as 100 Associated Press reporters. This broad and unprecedented intrusion was made that much more troubling by the fact that the government seized the records without even informing the Associated Press, never giving its lawyers a chance to object. Gary Pruitt, the president and CEO of the Associated Press, spoke for the journalism world after that, saying, AP has no political dog in the fight. It's not about Democrat or Republican. Our issue is freedom of the press and the rights instilled in the First Amendment that were created to hold government accountable. This administration, continuing his quote, which came into power on a platform of transparency, has been invoking ever more reasons to keep information confidential from the press and the public. In May, it was reported that the Justice Department, in legal filings, had labeled Fox News reporter James Rosen as a possible co-conspirator for reporting on intelligence officials' expectations of a possible missile launch by North Korea. By the way, the Fox story noted that some details were withheld to avoid compromising sensitive overseas operations. And the offending AP story was held out of print for 5 days at the request of government officials to protect ongoing operations overseas. My colleague James Risen, not to be confused with James Rosen, is facing possible imprisonment because he was refusing to testify in the case of a former CIA official accused under the Espionage Act of leaking information to him. The secrecy goes beyond national security stories. A report published earlier this month by Leonard Downey, who's the former executive editor of the Washington Post, and a report he did for the Committee to Protect Journalists, began this way. In the Obama administration's Washington, government officials are increasingly afraid to talk to the press. Those suspected of discussion with reporters about anything that the government has classified as secret are subject to investigation, including lie detector tests and scrutiny of their telephone and email records. The ever-diminishing transparency of government sets the tone for corporations and other organizations with even less of an obligation to conduct business in the open. This is not just a serious matter for journalism. This is a serious matter for anyone who values the relationship between the government and its citizens. Without transparency, we journalists cannot fulfill our trust with the public. And without that trust, I believe that the country suffers. You know, the fact is that technology sort of allows the government or anyone in control of the technology to kind of buy information wholesale in a way. I don't mean literally buy it, but collect it wholesale. It used to be, you know, if you wanted to have a search warrant for somebody, you go to court, get a search warrant for a specific person on a specific phone, and that's the information you would get. Now you can go to the, you know, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and get a much broader, you know, all this is legal, but you can go and get a much broader swath of information and collect it. And it is a little bit like that old, you know, if all you have is a hammer, everything begins to look like a nail. I mean, I think if you're, you know, it's hard to resist, I think. If your job is to protect the country from the next attack, you know, what the almost all, you know, kind of means are justified. And we saw that after 9/11, which I think is why it's important for the country to have an open discussion about this, because this is, you know, not just the business of the government, it's the business of all of us. Thank you.